If you used almost all of your sourdough starter to put bread together and you're freaking out that you may not have enough left to feed, fear not, you probably do. So I just put together 3 loaves of sourdough bread and I have very little left in my jar here, but there's plenty to feed. Believe it or not, a little goes a long way when it comes to sourdough. I only feed my starter once a day, so if it's already been fed recently after putting dough together, I don't feed it again right after. I like to feed my starter about 4 to 6 hours before I plan on baking. If the weather permits and it's a lot colder, I can get away with feeding it the night before and then put dough together first thing in the morning the following day. But I just baked with Eve here. So I'm going to scrape down the sides of my jar just to get the starter kind of all hanging out the bottom of the jar there. And sometimes when you scrape down your jar, you may have more starter than you actually realize, but you truly only need a tiny bit to bulk that baby back up. So I always just like to scrape down the jar, clean it up so we don't get it crusty, dusty, and musty around here. And then that way, when it's time for feeding again, it'll be ready to rock and roll. See how all of this is all over the rim of the jar? I really do prefer to wipe this all down as much as possible and to keep the jar clean, because if you've baked sourdough for any length of time, you know that cleaning your starter jar is probably not one of your favorite parts of the process, right? So let's keep this clean for as long as possible. I typically feed or switch out my jar every week or so, but in between, I just like to clean it up as best as I can. See how much starter we have at the bottom there? Plenty to feed. Even if I had a third of that, a fourth of that, a fifth of that, it'd be plenty to feed and bulk up again to get this whole jar full. Keep in mind when you do a higher ratio feeding to your sourdough starter, meaning more flour and water to the amount of starter you have in the jar, it can take longer for your starter to rise. That's totally normal. A 1:1:1 ratio, equal parts starter, flour, and water, will always rise the fastest. The higher the amount of flour, the longer it takes, but that's okay because higher ratio feedings will balance the acidity in your starter really well and keep it nice and healthy and thriving.